Good morning, Peter.
How are you, Rusty?
Yeah, good. We'll carry on today where we left off, and today we'll be talking about Angola, and of course the famous Colonel Callan, who you got to know. Before that, we'll just quickly recap on where we are with your merchandise and stuff. So first of all, we have Peter's website up and running for those who've been asking, www.petermacaleese.com. Take a look on that. Everything's on there. Great website. Secondly, the book, No Mean Soldier. We've gone on about that. People have asked the questions. Hopefully that book will, there it is right in front of you now, will be here, reprinted and ready to go within a couple of weeks, if not before. You must buy it, guys. You're going to, all these stories, you're going to read in depth of what actually really happened. The film Killing Escobar, we know that is out numerous places, but if you look on, just Google it to find out what suits you. If you want to watch that, it's great. I've seen it, and I saw it March the 12th, the day it came out. And of course, it really is an eye-opener to what went on all those years ago. And Peter's the guy that was there. So take a look at that. So Peter, we're going to talk now about Angola, Colonel Callan, and the mercenary setup that was out there, which you were involved in. And from you, your words on what happened. Okay, we know it was the Angolan War of Independence, and that's where you met the famous Colonel Callan. Okay, Costa Giorgio, his real name. So Peter, the years, what years did you serve in Angola when you came across the likes of Colonel Callan, who we're talking about today, and the rest of the guys, mercenaries that turned up?
In 1976, January.
So how long were you actually in the country?
The whole thing, I was the longest there. It took about 3 months.
3 months.
Yeah.
And that's where you came across Colonel Callan?
Yes.
Okay, that's what we're here to talk about. So how and why in 1976 did this come about? You decided that you'd like to get involved as a mercenary in Angola. Where were you to start with before that? Hereford?
I was in Hereford, and I was offered a job in Angola, and I took it. I flew from Heathrow to Ndili Airport, and then a bus picked us up and took us down to Angola.
And that's where it all started?
Yeah. And I drove into a small town there, and I met Callan. I'm not scared of many men, but in the case of Callan, I was very, very, very wary. I just never felt fully comfortable with him. But as I say, he was the guy in charge. I accepted that, and I just got on with what I was supposed to do. At the same time, I was promoted. We then moved down to a town on the coast. I was told to get 8 men, go to this town on the coast called San Antonio de Zaire. And we were down there for a few weeks. It was very rewarding to be there, in that I found out I was doing more hearts and minds than actual fighting. The people were starving, not because there was a lack of food. It was because the army was taking food from them. So I formed an MP unit, and their job was to make sure that none of the army involved themselves with civilians and taking food. I managed to get the generators up and running in the town, so we had some form of light. And I opened a bakery and they started getting bread. I then found a large store there, and belonged to a petrol company. There was mountains of food there, which I then moved into the town and gave it to the people. Now, when I arrived down in San Antonio de Zaire, a guy called Brummy Barker came to me and he said, "Peter, you were better out of that place you were." I said, "Why was that?" He says, "Because Callan was considering killing you." But I couldn't quite understand, for I was new to it all. And I just went, but I knew I could sense something with the man, and I was very wary of him.
I can understand that, Peter, the second sense that comes out, obviously. And it's not as though he's a Walt, because, as you said, he had plenty of guts. And that makes him a loose cannon, but a dangerous loose cannon, right?
The man didn't like guts. He did not. He was up for it the whole time. There was no leadership qualities there. And he'd done it as he saw at the time. It may have not been right, but he was a man on the ground. And he didn't handle it properly, put it like that.
So how close did you actually get to him? I know you've met him. Did you feel that you felt much more at ease away from him, but knowing him rather than being in front of him, not knowing what was going on behind you? There must have been some little hairs on the back of your neck somewhere sticking up, Peter.
No, I was glad to get away from it, because I could, if a guy did something wrong, he was beaten up or shot, and that's not my type of leadership. No,
it's not. We'll come on.
I was glad to get away from it.
Yeah, we'll come on to the leadership a little bit in a second, but okay. So I can imagine the first time you look eye to eye. You get the feeling, don't you? I've got to watch this guy. So you've got that far. You're still alive. So that's great. But, he ended up being executed himself at age 25 as a colonel.
Yeah.
Which isn't a great age, but a self-appointed colonel, no doubt. And of course, along with 4 Brits, they were executed as well. Did you actually know any of the Brits who were executed at that time as well?
I knew 2 of them, yeah.
You knew them well, or just acquaintances
on
the job?
I knew one of them was in the same battalion as me, in the Paris.
Right. And that was the one you knew well?
Yeah.
The other guy was more or less an acquaintance, however, still part of the deal.
Yeah.
So what did you think about when they were executed? Were you anywhere near the place when they were executed?
When they were executed, I was out of the country, because there was you can call it a show trial, and it was on the world stage, and this is what mercenaries do, and they were really made out to be bad guys.
Yeah.
What I will say here, and I've got to say this, is that Callan stood up in that court and he says, "These men only did what I told them. It was me that made the decisions." Can you see that? And that was a gutsy thing to do when you know your life's on the line. So, one's got to give credit where it's due.
Yeah, no question, mate. It didn't do him any good, but he did stand up and say it. And that would, as it's got now credibility on that side of it, that you said he didn't lack bollocks, and at the same time, he didn't lack it in front of a court either, by the sound of it. So, as I say, 25, pretty young age to get executed for what he did. However, we know what he did, and it wasn't good, and that's what he'll be remembered for.
Yeah.
So Callan's leadership qualities, or lack of, I mean, I got the idea that, yes, he didn't lack the bollocks, as we said. That isn't actually just leadership on its own. But in the face of the Cuban and Soviet-trained troops is when his leadership, I believe, fell apart, because they were crack troops, apparently in that day, well armed, but he didn't know what to do. Can you say something on that, Peter? You've haven't been with him.
He did have a go at them. I apart from at this time. But apparently he did have a go at them, but they had to take off because the numbers were overwhelming. And as that happened, his discipline became more severe in that he shot a person and a massacre took place.
Yeah. And he was in charge.
He was in charge, yeah.
Yeah. And of course, anybody in charge, you can't delegate responsibility. That's one thing. So that's what he'd be remembered for as well. And of course, his leadership qualities, you know, if people are going, he's the leader, I don't want to follow. Did that happen, do you think, in times throughout the mercenary, you know, maybe they weren't up for what he was doing? Did there become a crack there that you could see?
Yeah, I think it was 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. A lot of the guys went out there expecting it to be just like the British Army cruising around, occupying towns. When it came to the fighting part of it, some of them were very badly shaken. They couldn't imagine what it was like. So when I arrived there to take over from Callan, I just let them go home because they were no good to anybody. They were, you know, rings under their eyes, you know, negative talking. It was just, they were no good to anyone. So I sent them away.
Yeah, probably best to get them out of the environment, mate, for definite. But yeah, okay, we've talked about the lads that were captured and executed. There was a number of them, some of them British. Yeah. Did you come close to being captured yourself at all, Peter?
Yes, I heard there was some nuns having a problem. And the guys were all tied down with some of the training groups and whatnot. We were retraining the soldiers in the town. And that was it, you know. So we just, I went out on my own and I drove out to an area. And as I was driving down this road, there was a single road, just a little narrow. It was a track more or less, you know, but vehicles had been down it. And I noticed there was a French Portuguese type hat line in the ground, and I pulled the wagon, I stopped the wagon, and you know, there wasn't enough room to turn around. So I looked and I saw this hat. Although I never saw anybody, I saw some movement in the bushes. And I just acted casual. And I stuck the vehicle into reverse and took off going in the backward manner about 60 miles an hour.
Well, at least you got out of it, mate. That's the main thing. It's one of the ambush drills, isn't it? Reverse out.
The funny thing was nobody fired a shot. Yeah.
Now, well, you wouldn't want
to... They were fairly well disciplined.
Disciplined, mate, because they wouldn't want to break the ambush for one lone vehicle when they're maybe looking for a big fish. It would have given them away totally. But yeah, at least one of the drills that you taught is reverse out, and it didn't tell you how quickly to reverse. So that's the secret. But yeah, okay. What about the highlights, Peter, of Angola? You must have, I remember you mentioned hearts and minds, but your personal, you know, it's not all about shooting guns all day long. And, you know, when you go into these villages and stuff and you meet the locals and this, that, and the other, what sort of highlights did you get from that, if any, over the time you were there?
I noticed that the people were secondary. You know, they just didn't know which way they were going. If the FNLA attacked a town, they'd kill some people. If the MPLA attacked a town, they'd kill some people. And they just didn't know which way to turn. And also, everything was just breaking down. All the system had collapsed. You know, there was a lack of food, a lack of medical supplies. It was chaotic.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate because in the area I was sent to, I found a bakery, and I also found a large like a big hanger full of food that had belonged to an oil company. So I managed to get that, and I got it to the people. In order to stop the soldiers taking food from the people, what I did is I created an MP force. And their job was to, when the fish came in, that the people get served first. And then what was left over was distributed among various groups. It was very, very rewarding. I managed to get to talk to some Americans and Portuguese. They got me in some medical kit, and just to see the hospital up and running. It was all basic, but the fact is there was some form of medical aid for the people. And it was very, very, very rewarding. At the same time, I was preparing the place for defence. And, I dug a channel across the road. So as, if anybody did come in, they'd have to, I'll let some water in. So they'd have to go through about 4 feet of water to get to cross this road. But it was a bit of a barrier. At the same time, Holden Roberto, who was the president of the FNLA, came to see me, and he explained that Callan had been running amok and he was killing an awful lot of people. So he asked me if I could go and arrest him. And I said yes. So we flew up to a place called Macella. And as I was flying in, sorry, I'll go back again. I said, I'm not going to arrest this man on my own. So there was 4 volunteers who were hanging about in Kinshasa. And I think they saw some money in it for themselves. And they decided to, protect me while I did the arrest. So we flew into Macella. The plane landed. And I looked around for my escort. And they were gone. I now know how Jesus felt in the Garden of Gethsemane.
Did you ever find them? Did you ever find them?
They emerged after I'd done an arrest.
Yeah.
they were protecting the perimeter.
Yeah.
The vehicle came to me, and it was Callan's vehicle. There was a machine gun on it, and there was a Portuguese guy who kept training the gun in this all the time. And I went, get away. I told him to stop it. I told him to get off the truck. He got off the truck, and the guy there was Sammy Copeland. He was from Freepara, and he said, Callan's been arrested. And I said, who by? He says, the Cubans, And he, can you hear me, Rusty?
Yeah, I've just lost you a little bit on the sound, but
yeah,
sorry, on the
somebody's breaking through.
Just carry on, mate. Carry on.
Yeah. And a guy came along. With Sammy Copeland came along. There was 3 of them in the truck, and I asked them what they'd been doing, and then I'd heard other things that there'd been a massacre. So I just said, we better get this sorted out while I'm here. So I went to the site of the massacre, and I looked there, and I couldn't believe it. There was guys just lying there. They'd been mowed down, and it was, it's not very often you see a massacre like that. There was one guy I remember, he was still kneeling up, and he'd grabbed the top of a small bush, and he was shot through the head. And I just couldn't believe it, So I went back and I made an investigation and said, who done it? And they said it was Sammy Copeland. And we had a sort of court-martial as best as we knew how to do it. And there was a firing squad sorted out. And something came over Sammy, and he burst and went to run away, and somebody shot him. I'd have rather seen the thing going through and coming to a conclusion, but that is what happened. I'll add here, there wasn't a shortage of volunteers for a firing squad.
No.
It was just chaos. It was, men had lost the plot, and it was a shame because a few of them had good reputations within the army, but they'd thrown their hand in with the leadership as it was, and they dropped to that level. That's how it went.
Oh, well, yeah. Another story, mate. So to wrap up then, you know, the jaunt, as they call it, came to an end when two contingents of mercenaries sort of came together at the end, Peter, and basically they arrived into a broken war. Just give us a few minutes on that one, mate. Exactly what happened.
When I arrived out there, I recommended that they get an officer out there with some staff training that could get all the groups, work them all together, and we'd get somewhere. At least there'd be some form of coordination. Whereas you had us in one side and the Portuguese in another. And the Portuguese, even when I arrived there, they were planning to get out, and it hadn't really picked up yet. Can you see it? They were heading to some, I think it was Brazil. They were all heading to there. And it was just, I've never been involved in anything as bad as that in my life. It was just, I've never known such chaos, disorganization. And as I say, leadership was totally lacking. It was, I inherited it just as the whole lot was coming to the end. And it was probably a good thing for me, because I spoke to some CIA men and they said, it's over. There's no more money coming in. There's no more weapons coming in. Our advice is get out. And I got the men and I got them back into Zaire.
Well, at least you got out, guys. So well done on that. So Peter, thanks for the insight into Angola, and Colonel Callan in particular. The people will be very interested in that. And with that, I look forward to the comments that come through on it. Feel free to comment whatever you want, as you normally do, and look forward to catching up with everybody. Peter, thanks. Do you want to say thank you to everybody?
Thanks very much. I hope the program comes across well. Thank you.